Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 25th of June 2024. Let's get straight to where we normally start. Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course, and you can find those in the description to the video below. 1,180 personnel lost is there or thereabouts for the figures we have seen over the last 2 weeks. 4 tanks is certainly less than we have seen over the last few days. It's been a bit up and down, tank losses, and I think that's because tanks are just, well, they're not being used so heavily. The ones that are being used appear to be these ones turned into tracked garden sheds, and I think the Russians might have a bit of a lack of tanks, and also a desire not to attack in huge columns and use tanks in the way that you would traditionally use tanks. That could be a statement of, or an observation of the war as a whole, because when I think about the Ukrainian activity with their mechanized equipment, I was speaking recently about how I think Bradleys are more useful than tanks at the moment. And especially when Bradleys have the ability to use their autocannons and also have the tow missiles on top, so they can do tank killing themselves. But there's kind of more mobile than tanks. They can take troops in. You know, there's a versatility to a Bradley that I think gives it the edge in the kind of warfare we're seeing compared to the tank. Now, I'm not saying the tank is completely obsolete, but I think you need to have, you know, air superiority, nice to have helicopter support. You need artillery active, more, you know, everything needs to be in place to use all these things effectively. And I think in a situation where that's more difficult, something that's slightly more versatile like the Bradley will be more useful. But I'm no military expert, so that is just complete amateur conjecture, right? But so something needs to explain why there are fewer tanks at the moment being lost, and yet, you know, the personnel numbers are high. So they are using a lot of personnel-led attacks, infantry-led attacks, more than tanks. Tanks are, I think, are less useful, and they have fewer of them. And I think that seems to be a fairly plausible thesis. 18 armoured personnel vehicles, that's above average. So again, they're losing armoured personnel vehicles at significant numbers. I mean, it's not as high as we have seen, right? But that's still a significant loss. It's over average, and yet tanks below average. Artillery systems, 35. That's about double the average, or just under. So that's a significant loss there. 58 vehicles on fuel tanks. And again, you know, to go back to the original point, when we're seeing more motorcycles used and golf carts and bukankas and SUVs, then you're thinking, okay, maybe the thesis about a lack of tanks and not being so useful is probable. And then 6 pieces of special equipment. So another tough day for the Russian in some of these categories, but not all of the categories. When we go to Andrew Perpetua's loss stats, and usefully, he puts the synopsis as alongside it, which is really great. Thank you, Andrew. We see that there are 48 Russian losses and 24 Ukrainian losses. I think that might include the decoys, though, so it could be a little bit less there, in which case it's a sort of 2 and a bit to 1 ratio, which is good for the Ukrainians, but not what they need. Ideally, 3 to 1. Okay, let's look at the combat assets. We've got 15 Russian combat assets to 11 Ukrainian combat asset losses, and that's almost parity. So that is definitely a challenge for the Ukrainians there. So the overall stats are okay, but the combat asset stats are not quite so good. The Russians have had abandoned and destroyed 9 and damaged 6. So that's a fairly good ratio of destroyed to damage. The Ukrainians got 4 destroyed, 7 damaged. So that's a little bit better. So of those combat assets that have been hit, you can see there a lot of them are grey, so not so much of an issue there, or at least better, because you'd assume that the damaged ones have more chance of being fixed and brought back into play. Okay, so for the Ukrainian losses, there's an ANTPQ-36 radar hit, again by Lancet. Lancet's hitting these high-value targets in that medium range area. that is not good for the Ukrainians there. We've got a number of boats back on the list after seeing, I think, the Russians lose more boats than the Ukrainians. Now, the Ukrainians have lost a lot of boats there. And then when we look at the combat assets, we have a look to see whether the Western equipment features heavily on that list, or Russian or Ukrainian equipment. And actually, it is what I've been saying, that predominantly Western equipment is featuring. So artillery, AHS Crab, that's the Polish, South Korean piece there. Another unknown howitzer, who knows, so that could have come from the West, might be Ukrainian. A couple of Soviet era tanks, T-80, T-64. Then we have a Bradley, a Senator, two M113, sorry, and two Max Pros. So all of the vehicles in the infantry, in the armored fighting vehicle category, are Western provided vehicles, including a Senator there from Canada that has been destroyed. So I think that tells you something, goes along with what I've been saying over the last few weeks, that we are going to see the Ukrainians starting to run out of their legacy equipment in some of those categories. Or if they do have some, they are preferring to use Western equipment because it has a higher survivability rate. Okay, when we go to the Russian equipment loss, engineering vehicle, okay, BM-21 Grad, sorry, not Brad, Grad has been destroyed. I've got footage of that. That's a multiple launch rocket system. We got a T-90A tank. It is of the T-90 type, but it's the variant that's not quite as good as a T-90M, but that one has been destroyed, so they're losing quite a few T-90s at the moment. A few other tanks, and then a number of infantry fighting vehicles and APCs. Not as many as we have seen. Tracked garden sheds feature a couple in there. And then just look at the amount of ATVs here. So that's about almost 10 golf buggies, and that goes back to the idea that they might be running low on some of these other more optimal vehicles to use. Otherwise, they would be using them. Would you prefer to go from A to B in a war zone in a golf buggy or an infantry fighting vehicle? And when you've got drones about, and when you've got mines and these vehicles aren't at all protected against mines, when you've got shells and mortars flying around, I would prefer to be an infantry fighting vehicle. I've seen a lot of people. I know there's a lot of talk of Bradleys being much more survivable than, say, BMPs, and that is certainly true. That has been attested to by any number of Ukrainians. But I've also seen a lot of people get out of BMPs that look like the mine would have taken out everyone inside, and then it disables the BMP and people get out. I've seen BMPs get hit by drones and it brings it to a stop. It disables a vehicle, but then everyone gets out the back and you've got 20 people getting out the back. Same with tanks. But I've also seen a lot of Desert Cross golf buggies get hit by drones, and that drone just lands in the middle of people because they're all just sitting. Same as when you get an APC or infantry fighting vehicle with people sat on top and those drones hit on top. And that's going to be much more dangerous for the people sitting on top than the people sitting inside. But it seems obvious to me that infantry fighting vehicles and APCs will provide greater protection for people than a golf buggy. And so therefore, why are we seeing so many golf buggies? Do they go any quicker than AFVs? Do they not trigger mines as much as AFVs? So what's the advantage of using them? And the advantage is that they've got them, as far as I can work out. They wouldn't be using them if they had the opportunity to use more of the armored fighting vehicles that we've seen over the course of the war. So anyway, that's my thesis, and I'll stick by it. And a bunch of civilian vehicles and trucks and whatnot taken out as well. So when we go on to look at other bits and pieces here, we have the claim that, and this is going back a couple of nights, that there were S-300, S-400 systems, possibly 3 of those systems taken out, which is a massive loss for the Russian air defense coverage over Crimea. Jane Kiev here says, yet more Russian defense units liquidated in Crimea last night. So this was yesterday, the night before. Every day, the skies of Ukraine are safer for both Ukrainian F-16s and their homegrown drone fleet. And this was a Russian source saying 3 air defense installations were lost in Crimea. Military personnel were killed. Russian media reports late in the evening of Sunday, June the 23rd. Several ATACMS hit the Saki region of the peninsula as a result of the strike. 2 S-400 and 1 S-300 were completely disabled. Important air defense components were also lost. Those claims are still going around. We haven't seen the evidence of those yet, though, but those claims are still hanging around, and it's not looking good for Crimea at the moment. Now, here's the BM-21 Grad that was mentioned in that list getting taken out, and that was the end of that Grad. That's in a Pokrovsk direction, which is Avdiivka. Going west from Avdiivka, you get to Pokrovsk, and that's that general area. Now, on the other hand, Russians have claimed to have taken out, for the first time, a Ukrainian Iris-T SLM, a medium-range surface-to-air missile system, a transporter erector launcher, along with a support vehicle in the nearby forest belt by using Iskander-M ballistic missiles. The heavy scorch marks and fire indicate the tell was real. Now, I don't know about this, as there are a lot of people calling this into question. They claim to have used cluster ammunition on the support vehicle to the left. But as I said here, what the hell is going on with these weird cuts? Right, so this is a video. So bear in mind, like, if you're the Russians and you have this footage that one would assume is continual footage from reconnaissance right through to blowing it up, why would you cut out the middle bit of hitting the vehicle and then just cut to a puff of smoke? I just don't understand it. Like, if you had definitive proof, you would show that definitive proof. So I'm not necessarily denying that they've hit this, but if you're looking at probability, the probability for me shows that it didn't happen as they're claiming, or something is amiss here. So here you have some not very good footage showing supposedly an Iris-T. Then we've got smoke there. And you've got smoke that's not even in the tree line. And then we've got burning stuff and potentially 2 bits. Do you know, like, I don't get it. If you've got a puff of smoke from an explosion, you're looking at that. So why didn't you show it before the explosion? Why didn't you show it during the explosion? Why have you only showed it afterwards? And what looks to be, I don't know, there's a bit of a scorch mark. I don't know, it just doesn't seem like this is the same. Maybe it is the same area, but it's not quite, quite possibly the same area. But that explosion was left over here, to the left of that. It's just really weird. There's something not right with that. And as a result, it just makes me immediately doubt that what they claim is probably true. Even German aid to Ukraine says, sorry, don't see it. At first, I couldn't even identify the launcher 100% as a real Iris-T SLM launcher. Second, you don't see any impact, just an area burning. That's not enough confirmation for me. And then, War Vehicle Tracker says, I have to disagree with you. Says, while I could agree that it's not 100% ideable, the chassis is definitely a manned truck. There is a clear, and that's what he says is evidence of that being a clear manned truck. Personally, I'm not 100% sure there. There is a clear visible impact right next to the tail, picture 2. So if the tail was over here and here, where they said in the other picture, no, but it's not. Yeah, no, this, goodness me. Let's go back to that video. I'm trying to get the dimensions here, the different directions of the video. We've got, let's play that again. Okay, so we've got an explosion. We've got, I need to work this one out. Yeah, so I worked it out now. If you look on here, on this main picture where that smoke is, according to the video, the 2 components are there and there. And that's not what's going on in that. It's all very confusing. And then eventually this is seen as being on fire. So something could have been hit, but I just don't understand. Well, something was hit, but I just don't understand why you make those insane cuts when you're looking at the whole thing the whole time. just, yeah, weird. Anyway, let's move on. This is the Yak-52 plane that has been flying around. I don't know if it's the only one flying around Mykolaiv, no, Odessa is it, area, and shooting down drones. Well, it's a 2-crew plane where you got one person in the back, I think, with small arms fired, just firing at drones. Anyway, what's interesting with this, because it's a very low-tech solution to a really big problem, which are these reconnaissance drones. They're getting right back behind the contact line and looking over places like Mykolaiv and Odessa and saying, okay, here are targets we need to hit. And on the plane, there is this image. So this crew or this plane has been responsible for taking down 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 drones. And then we've got a bird and weather. And apparently that is because the bird and cloud at the bottom right are marking drones downed as a result of a collision with a bird and exposure to weather, which was witnessed by the aircraft crew. So the crew didn't actually take the two drones down there. But interesting that a drone flew into a bird and that a drone was taken down, maybe struck by lightning, and the plane got to see it. So they weren't responsible for it. But that's 10 drones that this plane setup has taken down. And I think, well, get a whole load of these planes up in the air and people firing at the drones, because those drones are definitely an issue. Right, then there was this bit of news that was going around the socials yesterday concerning, well, people thinking maybe a Reaper drone, an American drone, was taken down. According to the American drone, which one famous flying blogger writes about, no one bothered him or knocked him down. He simply turned off the transponder and returned to his airfield. That's all. Why, after the shame and tragedy in Sevastopol, tried to suck an imaginary victory out of thin air? I don't understand. This is such a shame. Okay, so the claim was that this expensive American drone, there aren't all that many details, but all the Russian sources were going on about how this American drone had been shot down. And then you had a bit of pushback from Russians saying, actually, doesn't look like it was the case. Some people saying that the transponder was turned off and this was all quite normal. Other people saying, actually, there was no drone. The American drones keep their transponders on, so that because they're flying in international waters, and so they shouldn't be under threat, and you can track them on Flight Tracker 24 or whatever it is. And there was no drone in the area doing anything like this. So lots of people putting counterclaims to the idea that the Russians have shot down an expensive American drone. Somehow, says War Translated, Russian Nazis don't really believe their own claims about the downing of an American reconnaissance drone over the Black Sea. They say you need to lie less, since otherwise military personnel have been promoted more than once for completely fictitious achievements. Guys, your whole country is like this. It's all fictional. All your greatness is only in propaganda videos and on pieces of paper. Why are you surprised? So anyway, if you want to read some views of a Russians pushing back against that, it's on the screen now. But yeah, it may be that an American drone was shot, or an international drone was how it was, I think, said originally. An international drone might have been shot down over the Black Sea, but it might have also been complete fabrication. Just on that, this is in the wrong place, sorry. Andrew Perpetua said, on that Iris-T that's been supposedly taken out, as I've just discussed, he's geolocated it, but he says, I need more time to analyze it before I have an opinion. And yeah, that I think is good, pretty good indication that it's not very, very clear cut. Something's happened. This is kind of where I'm at. Something's happened, but it can't. Nothing really explains why the Russians would have cut it so weirdly and done weird stuff with the video footage. Anyway, one of the biggest bits of news that came out yesterday, and this potentially has a massively significant impact on the war, is what took place with a huge blaze at the Platan Research Institute near Moscow. I almost did a breaking news update on this. So A number of people have died in a massive fire engulfing the Platan Research Institute near Moscow's strategic facility developing radio electronic systems for the Russian military. The blaze spread over 4,500 square meters, and the cause remains unknown. So this was huge news. There were people, I mean, it's horrible. There were people jumping out of windows because they had no option to their deaths. Not nice. One of Russia's main defense electronics producers and research centers, Nil Platan near Moscow, is on fire. Trapped staff inside. According to Platan's archived website, its components are used in all Russian fighter jets, nuclear launch munitions, S-400 air defenses, and various guided munitions. It's also apparently involved in developing electronic warfare. I mean, this is a very significant, strategically positioned fire, if you like. One would assume sabotage has something to do with this, because if you're going to try and take anywhere out in this war that's of this kind of ilk, then this is going to be one of the places. Death toll in the fire has reached 9 people. I don't know what it is now. Reportedly, 2 people went down when the fire came close. 7 more were unable to leave the building due to high temperature and smoke. So 2 people jumped out the window. Yeah, as I say, not nice. So Trentelenko says, oh my, this smoking incident was so nice. I'll take away the human aspect of it, just from a strategic point of view. The staff here are claimed to be primary developers of electronic warfare equipment in Russia. At a guess, the Ukrainian HUR did this. Ukrainian drones are going to rollick after this attack. So electronic warfare conflicts are best modeled by parallel exponential growth curves. That is, if one electronic warfare player falls behind, the gap grows exponentially. This smoking accident may stall the Russians for weeks to months, the way the RAF Bomber Command achieved after September 1944. So he is in a fairly good mind about this, that actually this could put the Russians back in the electronic warfare countermeasure arms race significantly. It could have been a big coup there for the Ukrainians if they were indeed involved in it. And if they weren't involved in it, then goodness me, that's incredibly coincidental and very lucky for them, strategically speaking. Anyway, moving on to distance munitions, standoff munitions and strikes. Russia put 3 regions on air alert last night. So Kursk, Voronezh and Belgorod, all fairly close to the Ukrainian border, saw air defense fire with several explosions heard in the latter. So Belgorod seemed to have been the site of much of the attention last night. There's quite a bit of footage concerning large explosions in Belgorod. Over a fairly large drone and rocket attack on Belgorod happened. Russian media report about the downing of all 29 drones, but footage shows several impacts. I mean, it appears to be ostensibly false what the Russians have claimed there, because there are at least 2 explosions that I've seen that appear to be direct explosions rather than air defense bringing the drone down. Belgorod was given some very close attention. And what else can be said? Tim White says, I'm also chasing conflicting reports in Voronezh. 2 hours ago, the local council gave an all clear from an air raid. 1 hour ago, Russia said they discovered and destroyed 2 Ukrainian aircraft-type drones, but some fragments hit an industrial site, causing a fire already put out. And now locals report in Olkovatsky, about 25 kilometers from the border with Ukraine, quote, explosive objects detonated far from civilian buildings. The HUR says, or GUR says, they hit an ammunition depot causing explosions and a huge fire which continue. This has just been confirmed by Astra and a video. So it seems actually another video now too from Ukrainian Intel. They said the operation in Voronezh was carried out by soldiers of the Department of Active Actions of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. So drones that could be controlled by those people, or who knows exactly what, or shelling, I don't know. But it is clear that something has been going off there. And in fact, there was talk that, I don't have it here, that there are 3,000 artillery shells that were being stored there, and they have all gone up. So it could have been quite a significant hit of an ammunition depot, and that's why there's such significant secondary explosions. And the fire had been going on for a long time. You've got a lot of people watching. That is not just, I think, a drone, some drone debris falling on an industrial industrial facility there. That is, as suspected, I think, an ammunition depot. Kharkiv is being hit at the moment. Smoke is rising there. I presume that's aviation guided glide bombs taking that out, or looking for some target inside Kharkiv. So that's something to watch out for. And then over the last, 24, 36 hours, Pokrovsk was hit. That is that, as mentioned earlier, that town to the west of Avdiivka, where the Russians are moving towards. 4 people were killed, 34 injured in quite a significant strike on Pokrovsk. Among the wounded are 2 children, 12 and 13 years old. They're in moderate to serious condition. The Russians fired 2 Iskander-M missiles at the town, destroying 1 private house and damaging 16, according to the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. So quite a bit of destruction there. Don't know whether any military targets were hit, but certainly, I mean, that looks like if a Iskander hit there, that is certainly not a military target. So whether it was, all munitions have a circle error probable, so 50% of the time they need to be hitting within what their designated CEP is. So if an Iskander, I don't know the Iskander-M, but say it's 50 meters, that means 50% of the time they need to be hitting within 50 meters of the target, and then the other 50% of the time they can kind of go anywhere. And that all together, so if you've got 100 missiles and 50 of them are flying, it could be 2 kilometers away, that can still be designated precision guided munition because 50% of them hit within 50 meters. But even if it's 50 meters, you can have a military target here, and then 50 meters away you can have some residential areas, and then that's still, precisely hitting its target, if you like. So there's a lot of leeway. It depends what the CEP is for an Iskander-M, but there's a lot of leeway for them to be not interfered with air defense and electronic warfare, but still miss their targets. Certainly 50% of the time. And even when they do hit their scare quotes targets, there's still some leeway there, depending on what the CEPs. Like some CEPs for missiles are like 1 to 5 meters, which means that they are really very accurate. And I assume that even though they can miss 50% of the time, that CEP, for it to be designated a 1 to 5 meter CEP, they don't. They're generally on point every single time. So just there's a lot of unknowns here with this missile. An ammunition depot in the so this is one in the Voronezh. This is one that says, sorry, I've got things out of order today. 2 drones hit a military unit, igniting 2 ammunition depots containing over 3,000 shells. The area was cordoned off and residents are advised to stay indoors. So yeah, that's a claim that there were 3,000 shells there. Explosions going off, more video footage. Anyway, sorry, should have had that one earlier. Right, now on to other bits and pieces. Day after the head of Azov launched a scathing attack. You remember I reported this yesterday. I didn't go into the details, but I showed it on the screen for you. The chief of staff, I think it was, of Azov, very publicly slagged off this unnamed Ukrainian general. Well, actually, that day, so yesterday, Zelensky acted and said, I've decided to replace the commander of the Joint Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Lieutenant General Yuri Sodol, with Brigadier General Andriy Hnatov. Now, this was reported actually in mainstream media articles that Zelensky's removed Sodol. So this is quite a big bit of news yesterday. But it's interesting that it appeared to have come as a direct result of this scathing attack by the chief of staff of Azov. So, goodness me, that had its desired effect. And it must surely mean that Sodol wasn't actually doing well enough in his job. Okay, we've got an answer about, hitting airfields here from the Pentagon, it seems. Why wouldn't the US allow, says Alex Rufoglu, allow Ukraine to strike with its weapons on the territory of Russia beyond 100 kilometers deep, given that this range does not cover the main Russian airfields? I just pressed Jim O'Brien on this. Let's see what Jim O'Brien has to say.
Unjustified invasion. And then to the questions, Alex, on why limit, I think Jake Sullivan's explained this. We see that the immediate need for Ukraine is to attack the targets that are jeopardizing Ukraine's ability to sustain the fight. And we think that's within the range that has been provided. Other than that, I can't add to what Jake has had to say about the theory behind it. I do think that this strategy, which is very openly announced and described does put the lie to any claims out of Moscow that the U.S. is looking to escalate this war. We're trying to respond to immediate security threats to the Ukrainian people in the way that we feel is best.
What's interesting about this, I mean, it makes me angry because it's poor. But what's interesting about this is he says it puts a lie to the claim. You know, it shows that the claim that this is escalatory is a lie, which by implication shows that their approach is anti-escalatory. So the whole rationale for, and he says, you know, I won't change the theory behind this, and I think it's sound, and it's what Jake Sullivan has expounded, and I'm not going to go against that. Effectively, is what he's saying, which is, you know, we'll only allow Ukraine to hit these targets within this range. He says that range is enough to stop any immediate threats. It's not good enough. It's not good enough because it doesn't allow air bases to be hit, which are the homes of these aircraft that drop all these carb and FAB guided glide bombs that are causing so much destruction across the front lines and into cities as well. And yet here they say, well, we don't want to be too escalatory, so we're not going to allow Ukraine to hit those air bases. So I think this is wrong-headed, and it is essentially dangerous, and it's not good enough for the Biden administration. And I presume here, as we kind of know, it's Jake Sullivan that's behind this. So like I've said before, it would be easy to blame Biden, but I think Biden's got other things on his mind at the moment. He's not going to be worrying about ranges of missiles across the border into Belgorod, right? But Jake Sullivan is, because that's his job. So he's a national security advisor that appears, I mean, the admission from Jim O'Brien here is that this is Jake Sullivan's decision, and I go along with that. So he's complicit, but it seems to be that Jake Sullivan really is the one that is holding the Ukrainians back from being able to do what they need to do. Right. And yeah, it makes me super angry. Ukraine hit more than 30 refineries, terminals and oil depots of the Russian Federation, says Zelensky. So he's put a number on that. A distance of 1,500 kilometers is no longer an obstacle for the SBU drones. We know all this, but it's interesting that he's very explicitly saying that, and that those drones can go an awful long way. Now, interesting that we haven't seen that take place now for quite some time. So I don't know whether they're just stockpiling a whole bunch of these very long-range drones in order to be able to do another wave of devastating attacks. Budunov, the Ukrainian intelligence chief, has said attacks on Russian oil refineries may not turn the war around. So it's not defining, it's not sufficient, but he believes they can affect the Russian economy and troops' morale, which in turn affects a military component. So it's like Ines conditions in philosophy. Yeah, it's necessary but insufficient condition. So these help as a component of a whole suite of things that we are doing. These will help turn the war around, but on their own is not going to turn the war around. But I think super important, these strikes, those 30 strikes, and the range that they can hit Russian targets at, I think is really significant, and is certainly causing the Russians to, I think, economically hemorrhage to some degree. And that in turn it will affect the way that they are prosecuting the war. And indeed, the way that they're managing their economy. Anton Garishchenko says Ukraine, on the other hand, has lost 9 gigawatts of generating capacity. I think last time I reported it was 7 gigawatts. Now it's up to 9 gigawatts of capacity after the last 7 Russian attacks on energy facilities, which is equivalent to the volume of energy consumption of the Netherlands for 3 months, or the combined consumption of Slovakia and the Baltic states. So that's the head of Ukrainigo. Netherlands for 3 months. So that's what's that lost in one day for Ukraine? Because when you just say 9 gigawatts and don't give a time period, so I don't quite understand that comparison. The point is, though, that Ukraine have been absolutely hammered in terms of their energy production, and this is, I think, their biggest vulnerability going forward. And you could end up completely crippling the country by destroying their energy infrastructure. And I think if that happens, if Ukraine are completely crippled, then I think you'll start seeing Ukraine go for Russian energy infrastructure. But they could also capitulate. That's how important energy is. If your country has no energy, now luckily they've got nuclear power plants that I don't think Russia will go for. But if they continue to take out the distribution infrastructure, then you can produce from the nuclear power plants, but you can't get it around your country. This is to some degree a fight against time here, where not only do Ukraine need to be having some major successes before November. We're going to talk about this in one of my next videos, because Trump has come out, or his advisors have come out with a peace plan or a strategy for Ukraine, which I think is freaking disingenuous and dangerous. But with that in mind, Ukraine are going to be thinking we need to do X, Y, and Z before November. But they're also going to be thinking we need to do things before we lose complete power in the country. This is a very real possibility, and one of their biggest weaknesses. Ukraine recorded 715 cases of Russian chemical weapon use on the battlefield in May alone. It's 271 more than the previous month. So that is an increase, a vast increase in the use of chemical warfare, as according to the Ukrainians by the Russians. And here, just the last thing I want to say, just a note on Twitter, because I think this is an issue that stretches. I don't know, because I've heard about this issue with pro-Ukrainian voices, but I don't know if this is a widespread Twitter things. In other words, the technical infrastructure is just crap and things are like falling apart, or whether this is targeted. So Jay in Kiev here says, this is a guy running against a Russian asset, Marjorie Taylor Greene, for US Congress. Help him out if you can. But actually what this guy, Sean Harris, so Sean Harris is running as a Democrat. He's just got through the primaries against Marjorie Taylor Greene in her Georgia district. Now, she is not going to lose that. She's Republican plus a million or whatever. So she's never going to lose that. But what his claim is here, and it's really interesting reading all the comments below it. His claim is, last night I won a Democratic nomination to run against Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm not sure why, but since then, I keep seeing posts by people saying that they never unfollowed, but are no longer following us. Can you please retweet this so people can find our account? And I've read like hundreds of comments below here, people saying, I was following you and now I'm no longer following you. Now, Tim White has had this. Loads of pro-Ukrainians have had this, where they have like a massive following, and people were talking about this. Julia Davis was talking about this some time ago, when Musk was getting all involved and being even more anti-Ukraine than he is at the moment, which is still anti-Ukraine. But there's a period where loads of pro-Ukrainian accounts were saying, I have lost loads and loads of followers. Please follow me back because something funky is going on. But I've not seen it outside of that context. So it could be a Twitter thing, but it might also be a MAGA Republican thing and anti-Ukraine. So I've heard it from anti-MAGA sources like Sean Harris having lost loads of followers, even though those followers have not unfollowed him. And I've heard it from pro-Ukrainian accounts as well. Let me know what your thoughts are, what your experiences are, and whether this has happened outside of those areas. Because otherwise I think it's somewhat conspiratorial here. And it's because we know that Elon Musk, for example, who owns Twitter, has changed the coding to put Ukraine news alongside disinformation. And if that's the case, there might be other ancillary things to do with that also makes people get unfollowed because it's seen as disinformation. Or it might be stuff to do with his positioning on being pro-MAGA, pro-Trump and anti-Democrat, partly because of regulations in the IT industry, but also to do with tax. There are lots of reasons why Musk is supporting Trump, because actually he'll make an awful lot of money off the back of Trump getting in, because he's going to make tax cuts, and also there's been a meeting between Trump and Musk, and you're pretty sure that something's going on there, and there will be a certain amount of scratching of each other's backs. So what Elon Musk can do for Donald Trump in terms of platforming him and amplifying his message, Musk will get back in terms of tax breaks and access to markets and the stripping of regulation away, which we already know is is to the benefit of Musk and is something he's looking forward to. Anyway, just that one to end with. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Take care. Speak soon.